Good day, class. In the previous videos, we have introduced the medical systems in Chinese medicine, as well as the examination rules have been established since Zhou Dynasty. As the time goes, the Chinese medicine keeps developing, as we can see from the medical books, from the tomes. For example, the medical books unearthed from the tombs of Han Dynasty, such as Ma Wangdui. We have introduced some of the books in the previous videos, but here, 足臂11脉究经, the foot and arm masturbation with 11 meridians. This book, from the title, we can see that the development of the acupuncture, especially from 11 meridian to 12 meridians. In the medical history, there were 4 books that's considered as the 4 classics in Chinese medicine and acupuncture. These books are where our theory, our basic theory, our treatment principles, our meridian and acupoints come from. These 4 books are 黄帝内经、黄帝内经、黄帝81难经、神农本草经、伤寒杂病论. So these 4 books are very important. Almost all our theories come from these 4 books. We are going to introduce one by one. The first book we're going to talk about is 黄帝内经. 黄帝内经. When we study the legends, we have mentioned the name of Huang Di. Huang, the color of yellow, Di, the emperor. So this book named after the yellow emperor. However, scholars from thousands of years ago until now all agree that this book was not written by Huang Di, although it named after Huang Di. The period of this book was written about 475 BC to 207 BC, so more than 2,000 years ago. This book was written by multiple authors. There are 162 articles in this book. This book consists of 2 volumes. So the first volume, volume 1, got 81 articles. Volume 2 got 81 articles. The volume 1 talk about the theory. The volume 2 talk about the acupuncture and masturbation, especially the theory on the meridian and acupoints. So that's the volume 1 and volume 2 of 黄帝内经. Why the scholars all agree that 黄帝内经 was not written from one author and not written in one period, certain years. Here, you got more than 200 years. So it was achieved by multiple authors, a long period of time. The reason we say so is because it's from the articles, from the 162 articles, we realize that the format, the writing styles were not the same, and even the language were not the same. This is very similar to English. The English we are using now and the English 100 years ago, you may still understand, but you will see there's some certain words we are not using today, but it was popular 100 years ago. So that's why the scholars agree that 黄帝内经was written in this period by several authors because of the different writing styles, the language styles. The first emphasis we're going to focus on is the theory. The concept of holism theory was from Huangdi Neijing. This is one of the most important theory in Chinese medicine. When we study the basic theory in future, we understand what's the concept of holism. So when we see patients, we don't see the disease itself. For example, a patient suffers from cough, or a patient suffers from flu, or for example, a patient suffers from COVID-19 when the patient comes to you. We don't see the COVID, the pathogens itself only. We see the patient as a whole with the pathogens. So that we see the patient, we see the pathogens, we also see, when we see patients, we also need to consider the environment. Does the patient live in Joburg, or does the patient live in Cape Town, or even in Durban? So the different environments, different locations of the patient where the patient lives may affect their health. This also may contribute to our treatments. We might use different treatments. On the COVID patient from Johannesburg and the COVID patient from Durban, we may use very different formula. We may use very different ingredients to treat this kinds of these patients. Where does these concepts come from? That's from Huangdi Neijing. Huangdi Neijing emphasized the holistic concept. The holistic concept requires us to see the patient as a whole, to see the patient and the environment as a whole, to see the patient and the society as a whole. So these are some of the basic concepts in the whole in from Huangdi Neijing. The second is the Huangdi Neijing emphasized the Zangfu organs and meridian. Zangfu organs, Zang organ and Fu organs. We also going to study in the basic theory. These are the internal organs. We divided we divide the different organs into two categories according to their characteristics. The internal organs and the meridians. The relationship between the organs and the meridian has been emphasized in Huangdi Neijing. So these are the theories that we are going to use. For example, in our daily practice, when we see the patient, I see their appearance. For example, their facial complexions, the skin color. We're going to see the color of their tongue. We're going to see the coating on top of the tongue. And then we're going to see in certain area of the body, we're going to find the abnormal area. And then we may think about this may related to certain organs. So where does the link come from? That's from Huangdi Neijing. In Huangdi Neijing, in the theory, it has the connection between the organs and the meridians has been discussed. Especially in the second volume of Huangdi Neijing, there were 81 articles. Most of these articles talks about the meridians, the acupoints, and the relationship between Zangfu organs. The third phenomenal theory from Huangdi Neijing is the application of the yin-yang theory, the five elements theory. As we discussed previously, the yin and yang theory, the five elements theory, were not used in medicine. These theories were from the philosophies, from the philosophy and were used to analyze all systems, all phenomena in the world, in our daily life, in the society, in the nature. So this theory not specifically designed for Chinese medicine. However, from Huangdi Neijing, these theories has been used in Chinese medicine. And until today, we still use these theories in our daily practice. Huangdi Neijing were written in the form of a dialogue. So Huangdi asked his officers, the medical officers. Huangdi asked the questions and the officers answered the questions. And this dialogue, this conversation were recorded, were written down and then become Huangdi Neijing. Huangdi Neijing is the earliest theoretical books in Chinese medicine that we can see today. Apart from Huangdi Neijing, we still have other books. We have the title of those books, but we don't have the books because they were lost. When we see from other books, we can see the titles. Also from this book, because the complete theory in this book were written 2,500 years ago. That's why we can assume that Chinese medicine has been practiced more than those years. Because in order to develop these theories in Huangdi Neijing, it won't develop in one day or 1 year. This is accumulation of the experience for long-term practices. The second book we're going to introduce is Huangdi 81 Nanjing, or you can short for Nanjing. Huangdi, this book still named after Huangdi, 81. It's the number 81, so these are in Mandarin. 81, 81. Nan, difficulties, Jing, the book. So this is actually a book to explain 81 questions, 81 difficult questions of Huangdi Neijing, because Huangdi Neijing were written very long time ago, and some of the words, some of the explanation may not be very clear. So in Nanjing, the authors answer 81 questions from Huangdi Neijing. Nanjing, we don't know the authors. It also might be from multiple authors. And the confusions raised from Huangdi Neijing were discussed. From question 1 to question 22, discuss the pulse sounds. The pulse sounds is one of the most important and one of the most interesting diagnostic methods in Chinese medicine. We're going to diagnose the patient's condition from the pulse in the neck, from the pulse on the arm, from the pulse on the foot. So that's the pulse sound. The pulse sounds were discussed in 81 difficult questions. The meridians were discussed. The internal organs were further discussed in Nanjing. The diseases in Huangdi Neijing. The books was mainly discussed on the theory of the organs as well as the meridians. So some diseases have been discussed in Huangdi Neijing, but it's not a lot. So in Nanjing, this book further discuss different diseases from question 48 to 61. Clarify the acupoints and needling techniques. So all these information we are going to study in future. Especially the needling techniques such as the reinforcing or reducing techniques, or in other words, tonify or purging techniques were discussed in Nanjing. So the techniques that we are using now were from Nanjing. The third one that we are going to introduce is Shenlong Bencao Jing. Shenlong, we have mentioned this name in the legends, a figure in the legends. Shenlong, a gentleman with buffalo head and buffalo horn. Bencao, herbal medicine. Jing, the book. So this book means that this book was focused on the herbal medicine and written by Shenlong. Same as Huangdi Neijing, we agreed that this book was not written by Shenlong, as Shenlong is a figure in the legends. So this book is the earliest medical works, the earliest medical monograph on herbal medicine. There are 365 different kinds of medicine. And also from the numbers of the herbal medicine, we can see that the Chinese medicine, the development of Chinese medicine from the beginning until now, that these books, Shenlong Bencao Jing, were written after Huangdi Neijing. In Huangdi Neijing, we have much less herbal medicine. And as the time goes, the experience and the knowledge accumulation until here we have 365 kinds of herbal medicine. 365, the number. In Chinese medicine, especially in the old books, we always use this number from the days of the year. So we got 365 kinds of herbal medicine. We also have 365 different acupoints all over our body. So that's similar to the days of the year. Here we use the medicine, or when we use herbal medicine, it not only refers to the materia medica. That's why of these 365, 252 are herbs, 67 from animal products, 46 from mineral products. So as you can see from here, even from the very beginning in Chinese medicine, although we are natural medicine, when we said we use herbal medicine, we not only use the plants, we use some animal products, we use some mineral products, but also from the ratio, you will see we got majority of the herbal products, some animal products. Actually the animal products we don't use that often nowadays. We still use some, but not often. There are some improvements in this book. For example, these medicines, 365 medicines, were categorized into 3 grades: the upper, the medium, the low grades. So this classification methods is very important, especially at that time. If you don't know how to categorize the herbs into different categories, you will mix up everything. So this book proposes the first classification methods used in herbal medicine, and later on when we discuss some other books, you will see those classification methods was developed from this method. The upper grades, the medium grades, the low grades were categorized according to their indications. So the upper grade herbs have no side effects, can promote health, can maintain health, and most of them are our food, the upper grade. The medium grade, the herbal medicine can be used to treat diseases. Some of them have a mild side effects or have mild toxic component. The lower grade herbal medicine is toxic. So as you can see here, even from the beginning, we understand that the herbal medicine the herbal medicine is no side effects, but we choose, or no toxic components. There are some toxic components in some herbal medicine, but we choose which one to use according to the diseases, according to the patients. So in future, if you use herbal medicine, no matter in which modalities, you need to be careful of these. The natural medicine and the herbal medicine doesn't mean no side effects or no toxic components. These knowledge or these experience have been put forward from Shenlong Bencao Jing, which was more than 2,000 years ago. The basic theory of the Chinese materia medica was summarized. So when we said the herbal medicine were categorized according to their indications, how do you know their indications? That's from the theory of the herbal medicine. We're also going to introduce in future the brief theory of the herbal medicine. These were discussed in Shenlong Bencao Jing, such as the properties of the herbal medicine, the cold function, the cold property, the hot property, the warm and cool properties. Some herbal medicine can move outwards to the head. Some herbal medicine has the trend to move downwards. And why? What's the reason? So these are all explained in this book. The principles of herbal medicine, the usage were discussed in this book. So this was the earliest manual of herbal medicine. So this is very similar to the prescription, the manual of the prescription of the herbs. The efficacy, the indications were discussed in this book. This book was one of the most important books if we study Chinese herbal medicine. The last classic that we are going to talk about is Shanhan Zabing Luan. This book also is the only book that we have the author, Zhang Zongjing. Zhang Zongjing, the name, Zhang, the surname. Dr. Zhang lived during the period of 150 to 219 AD. Shanhan. Shang means attacked. Han, cold or coldness. Cold or coldness. So Zabing means the different diseases. So this book talk about the diseases mostly due to the cold condition or cold pathogen. So in future, when we study the pathogens in Chinese medicine, we will understand what's cold pathogens. This book, Dr. Zhang, the reason why he wanted to write a book, he described in the prefix that in his family, he came from a large family. He's from his big family, he got more than 200 people. However, within 1 decade, in 10 years, more than 2/3 of them passed away. And when they passed away, and they will pass away due to the cold pathogens, he was so sad at that time that the doctors in that period, they don't focus on treatments. So most of his families passed away even with the treatments because the treatment was not effective. And some people at that time, instead of seeking medical health, they seek the witchcraft. They go to the witches. So that's also making him feel sad. That's why he studied the Chinese medicine theory and compiled these books. This is also another proof that Chinese medicine has separate from the witchcraft from more than 2,000 years ago, because in this book, Dr. Zhang clearly identifies that Dr. Zhang clearly highlighted that we don't use witchcraft or any religion or spiritual aspects in Chinese medicine. That's also the purpose of his book. All the information in this book is the medical science, and this book has controlled the development of Chinese medicine for thousands of years until now. This is one of the most important books in Chinese medicine. Nowadays, we still use this book. We still study this book a lot. As we discussed previously, the COVID-19 in China, the patient with COVID-19 were treated by herbal medicine. 90%, more than 90% of the patients were treated by herbal medicine, and more than 90% of them recovered. Where does the formula come from? That formula, the most popular formula that used for COVID-19 were from Shanhan Zabinun, from this book. So the formula, the prescriptions that we use to treat the COVID-19 was actually from 1,800 years ago in Shanhan Zabinun. This book, why it became very important until today, is because this was the first book that combined the theory and clinical applications. For example, because for classic we have introduced 黄帝内经, 神农本草经, and the Nanjing. As we discussed, there's a 黄帝内经. The volume 1 talk about the theories, the basic theories. The volume 2 talk about the meridians, acupoints. Nanjing discuss the 81 difficult questions raised from 黄帝内经. And then the next one was the one on herbal medicine. As you can see, all these are theories with the clinical applications. They didn't mention there. So some people can use well, but some they don't use well because they don't know how to use this. This book, this classic, 伤寒杂病论, Dr. Zhang emphasized the theories and the clinical practice. So in this book, for one disease, Dr. Zhang explains what happens, why this happens from the theories perspective. In the meantime, followed by this, Dr. Zhang highlighted the prescription that can be used for this condition. So this was the first book in Chinese medicine that we can see now combines the theory and the prescriptions. Some herbs were discussed in this book, and very accurate efficacy have been discussed. That's why until today we still use this book a lot. Contributions to the prescription science. The prescriptions or the formula refers to a group of herbal medicine. So when we see patients, we will use herb A, herb B, herb C, herb E, herb S, and then this becomes a prescription or a formula. However, how to combine them? What's the relationship between A and B? What are the relations among all these herbs? That's the prescription. The science on prescription was discussed in this book. This is also the first book to discuss these theories. Very strict principles were discussed in this book when prescribing the formula or prescriptions. Sometimes with the same formula, herb A, herb B, herb C, with the same formula, with the same ingredients, but with different dosage. Dr. Zhang changed the name, and also he indicates that the function also may change. For example, in one prescription, the herb A can be 15 gram, herb B can be 15 gram, and then in the other formula, herb A will be 30 gram, and then the herb B is still 15 gram. And in this formula, Dr. Zhang emphasized that when you change the dose of one herb in one formula, their indications may be changed. So these are all very strict, have been discussed in this book. Many dosage forms were created in this book. The dosage forms we use, such as the decoctions, the powders, the wine, or the herbal medicine for bath, and also some other like the pearls. These are all different forms were created in this book. Some of these dosage forms are still very commonly used in our daily practice. This book will consider as the ancestor of the formula or the ancestor of the prescriptions. So this is one of the most also all these four, especially 黄帝内经 and 伤寒杂病论, these two are very important in Chinese medicine theory, as well as acupuncture, because the theory we use in acupuncture is exactly the same as the theory we use in Chinese herbal medicine. And also, these books, for example, this book focus on the prescriptions, focus on herbal medicine. There are also some information in this book that talk about acupuncture. For example, Dr. Zhang has mentioned in this book, moxibustion can be used to treat the internal deficiency, especially for internal coldness. So in future, when you see some patient with the internal coldness, if they got the cold hands, cold fingers, cold feet, or if in female, they got pale tongue, they got dysmenorrhea, they got painful menstruation. And then if you diagnose that this patient is due to the cold condition, you can use moxibustion because Dr. Zhang has told us that moxibustion can be used for internal coldness. And also in this book, Dr. Zhang has gave us some prescriptions or acupuncture points for certain diseases. So from this book, we will understand that the practice of Chinese medicine, the practice of acupuncture, traditionally we combine with the herbal medicine and acupuncture. Although when we study acupuncture, especially now when we study this program, we focus on acupuncture. So from the study of these information, you will know that acupuncture can be used independently. It also can be used as combination of the herbal medicine. A brief summary of this video. In this video, we have discussed the four classics. These four classics has symbolized the development of Chinese medicine from the experience base to theoretical base. So from the practices, the clinical practice based on the experience developed to the practice based on the theory. So we can use the theory to analyze the clinical phenomena. We not only know how to use, we also know why. What's the reason this herbs work or this acupoint works, or what's the reason why it doesn't work. So these are from these four classics. In future, in our study, Some of these classics have been translated into English, so you are encouraged to read them. Thank you for your attention.